used to be a data scientist and then transitioned to product management. Currently, I'm the product manager for this product, MLIS, the machine learning inference service from HPE. And prior to being at HPE, I worked at Alexa on their ML infrastructure and also at Cruise on the infrastructure supporting the autonomous vehicles there. And I'll turn it over to Jimmy for a brief introduction as well.
Thanks, Derek. Yes, I'm Jimmy Whitaker. I guess I was part of the Pachyderm community a little while ago. I've been working in machine learning and data science and NLP and speech recognition and those types of things for close to a decade now, which is kind of scary. And yeah, no, there's some really cool things. I've worked on models for doing compliance monitoring and the financial industry, working on Pachyderm to build out machine learning ops products and all kinds of other things. And yeah, we've been focused pretty heavily on inference, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So yeah, so it's a fun time, and yeah, we'll get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Jimmy. Yeah, so we're going to start this webinar, but I think setting the stage for why inference is important, or like how we got to this point. And if you could go to the next slide, Jimmy. Yeah, so here's just a brief rundown of what we're going to cover today. First, just at a high level, what is LLMOps? What are the challenges with the deployment for large language models in particular? And then how does MLIS, the product we're demoing today, address those challenges? And then we're happy to share a demo to showcase what the product actually looks like for you all. So yeah, so let's set the stage for, I guess, how we all got to this point. For those who've been in the industry a while, I think everyone remembers 2022 when ChatGPT first entered, first entered the market, and it really transformed overnight how companies and even individuals thought of the potential of machine learning. At least from my own experience, machine learning at many companies went from a interesting use case with a few applications to be the dominant force for transformation to change that companies wanted to incorporate into every application they had. And it changed customer service, content creation, software development. You may have used many of the tools yourselves or developed or fine-tuned your own LLM from Hugging Face, to do so in support of your own daily tasks. And so what we're seeing right now is the continued rapid growth and adoption of large language models, machine learning in general across industries ever since that first launch of ChatGPT in 2022. Even with some of the focus on costs that we're seeing today from companies, there's not really a slowdown in these investments in AI. The market is still believing in its potential. But the other change that happened with the development of LLMs compared to traditional deep learning models of the past is deployment became a really crucial piece for businesses to unlock the value of the application. There used to be a lot of focus on training and eval and deep learning. And now what we're seeing is a lot of the challenges on the deployment side with guardrails, with scaling, some other issues that we will cover in the coming slides. And that's one of the reasons we honed in at HPE on deployment, is we thought it had unique challenges that the current product offerings in the market were not, I guess, able to address, that it was really slowing down all of our work as data scientists to take these LLMs and really introduce them as the transformational agents that they are in production use cases. And so what we're going to do quickly this morning, what I'm going to do is walk through some of the main challenges that I've seen and that I've seen in my own experience and we've seen from our customers. Yeah, so if you could run to the next slide, Jimmy, thanks. So first, just to take a step back, I want to set the stage for what is LLMOps. So large language model operations, this is the practice of streamlining the deployment, monitoring, and optimization of large language models in a production environment. Of course, as you can see on the right here, across the large language model ops lifecycle as a whole, and the development of a model, you always need to start with data preparation. You need to either create your knowledge base and context for your RAG application, just some prompt engineering, or you need to do optimization and fine tuning for the model. We have other products at HPE that we've talked about in the past, and they will also be sequels to this webinar that will cover kind of each of those circles that are in the dark blue on this slide. And what we're really focused on today, and where we saw gaps in our current product offerings with the launch of LLMs, is really these light purple circles for deployment, monitoring, and logging and governance. So of course, this is just one part of the overall life cycle, but it's a crucial one that we think there are specific gaps and challenges for that we'll be covering today. And let's go into what those challenges are. So at least we see kind of three major buckets of challenges that you face when trying to deploy a large language model. The first one are technical challenges, like how do you do it? The second one are operational challenges, how do you maintain it? And the third one are security and compliance risks. So these are challenges associated with concerns regarding privacy, concerns regarding like legal um, your legal compliance with developing regulations across countries. And so in the next slide, we're going to dive into some of these in a little bit more detail. And so let's if we put ourselves like the shoes of someone trying to deploy a model, which is a place we may be in today. We've just spent a ton of work preparing our data, cleaning it. We've evaluated the model, checked it, make sure it meets our performance metrics, and we're ready to deploy. It's not just as simple as clicking a button. Like there's a whole other set of challenges that companies spend a lot of money employing entire teams just to resolve. And so I'm going to dive into these just a little bit more specifically. So on the technical challenges side, there's two main areas that we see. So one is you have to scale your model. If this is like a first-time application, maybe you're starting with just a few users, but of course you want it to grow. You want it to scale. You want hundreds, thousands, even more than that, users using your LLM, engaging with it. And so you have to scale across GPUs, and you need to do that efficiently, like in real time as those users come to you. And the second challenge here is you need to optimize your hardware usage for those GPUs. GPUs are probably the most expensive AI expense of the market today. That's why NVIDIA's stock price is performing like it is. And both your ability to scale like up and down across GPUs to free them up for other use cases as your model usage scales is critical, and also how you optimize just the usage of those GPUs in general, like for each one that you're using, is very critical to making sure that you're making efficient use of those costs and that you're able to scale your model without spending all of your money essentially on the hardware. The second set of challenges are operational challenges. So aside from managing the hardware side and scaling, how do you manage and maintain the performance of your model in production without negative impact to the end users, your end customers who are making inference calls to the model? So first, you of course have to track your performance metrics. You need to make sure that the model is performing with, let's say, latency expectations that you expect. You also need to monitor drift. So you need to compare that input and output data compared to the input and output data that you saw in training and eval for your large language model. And then, of course, directly tied to tracking the performance of the metrics, you need to detect those issues promptly. If you see drift, if you see declining performance and latency, you want to be alerted quickly, and you want to be able to fix it before it impacts, or like before your customers see at a large scale, like those issues in production. And finally, you want to have a seamless rollout of new updates. Every model in machine learning, whether it be an LLM or just a traditional machine learning model, you're going to want to update it and iterate on it over time. And when you roll out a new update, you're going to want to do so in a safe environment that can catch issues early. And that is, when you roll out that new update, it's something that your end users don't even notice. And finally, the security and compliance risks. So this is the area that's developing probably the most right now within the LLM space. But of course, you have to protect the privacy and security of your data. And so there's regulations like HIPAA, GDPR in the EU that regulate how data must be protected. And the fines are quite large for companies that fail to do so, in addition to the just reputational damage you face. The second is detecting vulnerabilities. So a vulnerability could be an unauthorized access or data leakage. This is crucial for maintaining trust in your model. We know with the launch of LLMs that they can unintentionally expose sensitive user data in their answers. And so it's vital to be proactive in detecting these vulnerabilities before you are vulnerable and before it impacts too many customers. And finally, just ensuring compliance in general. So every industry, every company has their own compliance standards for privacy checks, drift detection, monitoring, things that are critical to make sure that you're in legal compliance and not exposing yourself or your company to legal jeopardy. And it's critical within the deployment space to make sure that you have the tools in place so that you know you're in compliance and it's easy to do so without taking up all of your time. So in general, maybe just to summarize, like across this slide, there's a number of challenges in deployment that are unique to deployment. And our goal as data scientists is to spend our time iterating and developing new versions of the model, not spending all of our time managing all of these risks of deployment to make sure we're scaling, to make sure we're not exposing user data, et cetera. And so what we're developing with MLIS is the tool to handle these challenges for you so you could go back to the work that matters most, making your LLM perform better for your end user. And so I'll turn it over to Jimmy to talk more about the product that we've developed.
Awesome. Thanks, Derek. Alrighty, so yeah, we've kind of alluded a lot to MLIS, and what that stands for is our HPE Machine Learning Inference Software. So we've been working on this. We GA'd it at Discover in June of this year, and it's already getting some great reception. We're really excited about it. We've worked really hard on it, and one of the key pieces, like you can see pretty much front and center, is we want to provide something that is not difficult for people, for data scientists or people like me to be able to use to actually interact with these things. You don't need to be a Kubernetes level expert, but you can get all the benefits of having something that's running on Kubernetes and scaling up and down, and makes it easy to manage these models and even do custom things throughout the process. So we wanted to make it simple for you to use, but also not make it completely click where you can't do anything complex. And so we think we've really struck the right balance with this product. So that's why we're really excited about it. So Derek talked a lot about these kind of three different situations, these three kind of issues that we run into when we're working on something that's reliable for large language model operations, especially on like the inference and deployment side. And so I just want to briefly talk about with those three categories that he laid out, just some of the ways that we're approaching some of these things before we go in a little bit deeper. So the first thing on the technical side, so there are many, many different ways to optimize your large language models, how you want to deploy them and everything else. There's a wide range of models. Some are fine-tuned, some are just the foundation models like the Llama 3s and stuff like that. And then there's plenty of custom things that you may want to do that may not be exactly large language models, but large language model adjacent, or even other types of models as well. So, so what we've done is we've tried to build in a few different avenues where you can run these models and make it as simple as possible, but then also give you the ability to do custom things. So one of the key areas of this is NVIDIA, obviously, is doing some really amazing things with NGC, with their NVIDIA GPU compute cloud. And we're integrating with them a lot on some of their models called NIMs, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But basically, these NIMs are NVIDIA's ways to package up some of the main models to make them highly optimized through like Triton Inference Service, through TRT LLM, a lot of the underlying technologies that are going to make them run really, really fast. If you're using Hugging Face, then there's a couple different ways that you can deploy things through Hugging Face, so with OpenLLM or VLLM, or you can even do something completely custom as well. The cool thing about this is this actually makes it where you don't have to go through the laborious process as a data scientist of building Docker containers and all these types of things just to get the benefits right out of the box of these LLMs and just start interacting with them and using them. This also means that you don't have to do that low-level optimization of figuring out how do we get this model to take advantage of so some of these memory optimizations under the hood to take advantage of the GPUs and all that stuff. That all gets built in, especially in the case of NVIDIA's NIMs. Next, we also have auto scaling. So auto scaling is kind of enabled. You can select if you want it. Well, we'll see this in a little bit, but you can select if you want this to scale automatically, if you want it to be a fixed instance or whatever else. And this can really take care of these real-time traffic demands, which are really, really useful. For instance, even if you're in development and you're running some big workloads sometimes, but not big workloads, then you can dial down the number of GPUs you're using on your cluster. And then lastly, here on the technical side, this is deployable on any Kubernetes environment. So if you're running on-prem, then that's perfect. It's very easy to or straightforward. I shouldn't say easy. Kubernetes always comes with some complexities, but it's pretty straightforward to install Kubernetes, and then installing this on top of that cluster is straightforward as well. But even if you're running in the cloud, you can use the same software in both places to be able to manage your Kubernetes infrastructure with respects to doing inference. On the operational side, once you've deployed your model, you're usually doing a variety of things. This can be monitoring the number of requests that are coming in, maybe even looking at some of the details of some of those requests, doing canary rollouts when there are updates to models. Um, and you may want to automate a lot of this through CI/CD. And you can do all of these things with MLIS as well. And then finally, on the security side, this model and this approach means that you're not restricted to a cloud environment. You can run it in an on-prem way, so you can be completely removed from the internet with your LLM operations. We also have authentication in the form of you can put API keys on top of your deployment, so you can authenticate them and issue tokens and all of that stuff. You can have managed like admin settings and the authentication and authorization components that you would expect from an enterprise application. And we have a multi-layered security approach that makes that not only manageable, but also very, very secure for enterprise applications. Sorry, the poll jumped in front of me. So at a high level, this is kind of a overview of the different components that have gone into MLIS. So here on the left, we have our packaged models, and this can be in a variety of different formats. We'll see NVIDIA NIMs today specifically. But you can also use Hugging Face models or models that have come from the machine learning development environment and other types of things. But inside this, so we have these LLM tools that are in there. We have these customized model tools, inference optimization. I won't go through all of these, but basically you have the ability to do a lot of these operations inside of MLIS. And we try to make it very simple and straightforward to use while also giving you all the benefits of taking advantage of your GPU hardware underneath the hood and being able to schedule and route things appropriately. Then on the far right side, we have our applications. And so this is where you're connecting to the large language model deployment. So this can be your chat UI, so like a chat GPT-like interface. This can be through APIs if you're running things like, for instance, evaluations or something like that on your overall large language model or fine-tuned model or something like that, if you're in the development phase. And even just like agent workflows, if you're iterating with these models and you have some custom code running somewhere else that's just interacting with these different models that are deployed, say it's a coding large language model, or if it's or just like a base large language model, or even a SQL large language model. There's a lot of different things that can go in there, and you can build your agent workflows on top of these endpoints as well. So we want to dive a little bit deeper into the NVIDIA stuff. Obviously, NVIDIA, as Derek said, is kind of the big player in the large language model space. This is how you're building out, or typically how you're rolling out, rather, your large language models. They're running on NVIDIA hardware most of the time, and these NVIDIA NIMs are a huge step forward in being able to have something that's reliable and optimized for the NVIDIA hardware itself. So basically what a NIM is, it's a pre-built container that provides the inferencing microservice all bundled up inside of it. So it has the APIs exposed for the standard kind of OpenAI API endpoints and things like that. It's got the optimizations, the Triton inference service, the TRT LLM, all of those types of things built in and configured to run for that model and optimize the performance with the GPU that's being used. And what's really important for enterprises, especially, is there's enterprise support with this. So this goes into the NVAIE, which can get bundled or is bundled and can be bundled with MLIS, which is getting NVIDIA support for these models and for the NIMs that are being deployed inside of the system. And so this is really, really great for getting started and getting probably as optimized of a performance as you can get out of these large language models right out of the gate. Then what MLIS, or machine learning inference software, is bringing to the table is typically with NIMs, you're having to go through this process of doing a Helm deployment and some of these other things that can be a little complex, especially to data scientists, and iterating on those if you don't have those skills can be challenging, to say the least. And so what MLIS is adding on top of this is this intuitive dev experience through the GUI, or we have a CLI if you're wanting to automate things and run things from the command line, to make it just really straightforward to have these package models be available, to create deployments, to roll out new deployments with Canary deployments and all these other things. And so overall, this is really just trying to streamline, excuse me, the LLM operations while also not taking away all the things you would want from something that's an enterprise inference software. So like the security mechanisms are all in there, the auto scaling canary rollouts are all in there, and you also get the monitoring and logging along with that as well. The next thing we're going to talk about is this is going a little bit deeper, but on the same thing, and I've alluded to some of these things, but what's going on inside the NIMs and how this is fitting inside of the machine learning inference software. So we are taking these NIMs and we're routing them using Kserve under the hood with Kubernetes and then doing the whole deployment with Helm of the entire software stack. But the NIM itself has got some of these things inside of it. So like the Triton Inference Service, this is really great for the streaming applications and everything else involved in that. TRT LLM, TensorRT, and yeah, just the optimizations that are really going to be necessary for the lower level interaction with the model or interaction with the GPU to give you the best results with your model. And then MLIS is taking care of basically all the scaling and routing, making the endpoints available, all of those complex things that you would typically have to do inside of your Kubernetes cluster directly. Okay, so first off, what we're seeing here, so this is an instance of MLIS running. I currently have, I guess, just the overall dashboard that's opened up here. We can look through and see we kind of have these four different components. Again, this is making it super simple that we can see everything that's going on. We can see in our deployments, these are the deployments that are running or maybe have been paused or something like that. We have our packaged models. So this is where we'll probably be interacting the most to create our model, and we'll do all that in a second. And then we also have registries. So this is basically where you can say, I want to create a registry that connects with Hugging Face or my NGC registry where I can connect to NIMs. And so this is built in. So it's a simple configuration to say, in this case, we're going to be using the Llama models for this example. And so our team name is the meta team, and then we're using the API keys and we paste all these things in there. And this gives us a registry where we can create some models, or we can pull those models from that registry. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to create a Llama 3 8 billion instruct model. And so I just created this add new model up at the top here. So this package model, I'm just going to configure this. We're going to select our registry. I'm going to say this is the NIM registry. And right out of the box, it already pulls here are the available models in this registry. So I could just grab this instruct model and move forward with it and start configuring some other things. Instead, because we'll see why in a second, I'm going to actually use a different model for the moment because I want to show you some canary rollouts later on. So I'm going to go to an older version of this Llama 3 model that was released, or this NIM release, and we're going to go forward with that for the moment at least. So then we have resources. So this is where we configure. So for this model, I want to know how many CPUs, how much memory, how many GPUs, and the type and everything that I want to use for this package model. So I'm just going to, and we also have some default templates. So I can say this GPU tiny, or I can say it's large and I want 4 GPUs or something like that. So there's a lot of different ways we can configure this. I'm going to grab the GPU tiny and just edit a couple things here. So I'm going to give it between 4 and 8 GPUs. Seems appropriate, and there's ways to figure this out, but I'm just going to do this a little bit manually right now. And I'm going to give it some memory and say we want a single GPU, and I'll say the type is the Tesla A100. The last tab that we have here, this is where you can add some really interesting things. This kind of gives you a lower level access to the container that's actually being deployed. So if you want to set some specific environment variables, if you want to configure some settings inside of your deployment, then this gives you an option to be able to do that and have that all tracked within MLIS. So commonly we may see like a debug argument or something that we would want to pass in here if we're debugging this model. But there are a lot of options for going a little bit of a layer deeper with that packaged model right there. So I'm going to create this model. We can see nothing really happens right now. It's just saying, okay, I can connect to this model. I know that I can pull this model. Everything is okay, and we're ready to deploy it now. So we've created our package model, and now we can create a new deployment. So I'm just going to call this deployment my chatbot. I'm going to go to the packaged model tab next and select the model that I just created. And then this is where we get to some of the infrastructure things that are going on under the hood. So in Kubernetes land, there's this idea of namespaces where you want to deploy this model. You may have different namespaces for different types of GPUs, or there's a million different ways that you can organize your information inside of the Kubernetes cluster. But this will auto-populate with at least the available namespaces to use. We won't go into too many details, but basically this gives you a lower level of I guess, decisions that you can make from an infrastructure perspective. You may have a dev area where you have some GPUs allocated to dev, and then you have production in a completely different area where you don't want people to deploy your models from and everything. And since I'm an admin, I can see all of these right now. We can also enable our endpoint security. So this is if I want to have an API token to be able to access that model and completely lock it off from any type of interaction. I'm not going to do that for right now, but yeah, it's really easy to enable this API access, and then I would create an API token to interact with that model. Next, this is where we get to some of the scaling. So we have a variety of ways that we can scale, and we have some templates as well. And we can edit these templates and add things specifically for us if we're interested. So this is the one I'm going to use at least is this fixed one. So at least one instance running all the time is basically, or only one instance running all the time is what this is going to do. So this is saying the minimum instances is one, maximum is one. And as far as scaling, as request per second, it won't really matter for this because we're not doing any dynamic scaling. But we would say if we had for instance, I want to scale from 0 to 8, and then if the request per second gets above 10 for a particular instance, then it's going to add another GPU, and it's going to create a new deployment on that and do the appropriate routing between those two according to these requests per second. So there's a lot of ways that you can configure this, but this is what gives you a really easy way to set your scaling parameters and be able to create these models and reliably, and rely on them when they're deployed. And then finally, we have a similar, or pretty much the same, but similar advanced tab. So this is if we want to add some environment variables for this specific deployment. And this just gives us an extra way to add some things to, instead of adding it in the package model, which will be the same for every rollout, this would gives us some deployment specific things that we could do. So I'm going to create this, and what's going to go on under the hood is this chatbot is it's starting deploying. So it's pulling the container from NGC. It's going to pull the model. So this may take a minute to start up because it's going to have to pull the model and everything. But there's a few different things we can talk about while this is actually being deployed. So at least in this interface, we can see the package model version that we have here. And we can see the resources required. So we have this nice interface to be able to look at all the different things that are going on. Oh, whoops, I'm not on the deployment. Look at all the different things that are going on. We can see that I don't have authentication enabled, the namespace, and all of the other details along this. We can also see a timeline. So this tells us everything that's going on under the hood with our model and everything that's going on there. Any of the advanced things, and then we can also create API tokens for this model as well. So if we had that authentication enabled, then we would actually be able to create, then our API tokens would be the only things that are giving us the ability to access this model. So this is going to take a quick second just because it's downloading a lot of things. And while we're doing that, I want to talk about a few of the other things that are particularly important in the LLMOps theme. So down here, we also have, obviously some settings and things like that, but we also have this API. Let me close that, sorry. This API endpoint. So this is where if you're wanting to go a level deeper and start to automate some of the things that you would be wanting to use, or automating things with MLIS that you would be wanting to do. So if you want to automate registry creation if something happens, or even creating package models based on some type of an iteration workflow. For instance, we see quite commonly people using MLDM or Pachyderm for the open source community to automate some of these model building processes and stuff like that. So if you're wanting to automate pushing those models to MLIS, then you can do a lot of those things with this API, or alternatively with our CLI. So there's a lot of really cool things that we can do here, and that's really exciting. So my inference surface is up and running. I can see that I have this endpoint here. If I go to this endpoint, worry not, the slash docs page is what gives me this Swagger interface, and this tells me the API that is available for this deployed model. And so we can see we have the normal or some of the health and readiness check endpoints where we can actually get all of our logging from. We also have the models completions and chat completions endpoints that are available. And this gives us the ability to use basically any type of OpenAI API compliant tool to interact with these models. And I'll show you that here in just a second. But if we look at this, we can try out this models endpoint, and we can see that, yep, I'm getting this Llama, Meta Llama 3 8 billion instruct model is available here. So what I can do with that is I can pull up a chat interface, and I've configured this to look at my deployment, and I can select my Meta Llama 3 instruct model, and I can just ask it a question. Tell me what HPE is doing in AI. And this is going to kick off and hit the service, and then it's going to come back with all of the information, assuming I didn't configure something wrong. And oh, there we go. The streaming is a little bit slow on my internet, I think. So, but yeah, this will stream back the content, and we can see a bunch of interesting things that are coming back from my query. So that's kind of just the base level. We've deployed a model. Now let's go through. I think we have some time. Yeah, let's go through how we would then go through the updating process. So I have if I go back to my packaged model, so I have the model that I deployed. And remember, we deployed an older version just for the sake of kind of seeing what this process is going to look like for updating this. So I can see I'm running the 1.0.3 version of this NIM, but say it's been updated and I now want to update that model. So I can see that the newer version is the 1.2.2. And all I have to do is go in here. I edit this packaged model to update it. And then when I save it, this creates my version 2 of this. And it's checked to make sure that that model is available or that container is available, and that we're ready to go. But we can also see this old version 1 of that model as well. If I go back to my chat deployment, we can see I have V1 that's deployed right here. But now what I want to do is say I want to actually deploy, I don't want to interrupt anybody's workflow or anybody's interaction with this model. I want to update it and make sure there aren't any errors and everything, but I want to do kind of a light update. So what I can do is something that's called a canary rollout. And so what this does is it says, I want to change this deployment to have, in this case, I can select what percentage of my traffic, but I want this to be my version 2 of the Llama 3.1 model that's been deployed. And I want to give it, let's say I want to give it 25% of my traffic. So when I do that, this is creating a canary rollout. So it's going to modify my original deployment here. And we can see that for right now, while it's deploying, 100% of the traffic is going to this version 1. So it's not interrupting anybody else's workflows or anything else like that. They're still able to interact with this endpoint in the exact same way that they always have been. Under the hood, this model is being deployed, or a version 2 of it is being deployed, and this is going to give us the ability that once that's up, the MLIS software will automatically start routing the percentage that we selected, which is 25 here. We'll route 25% of the traffic to this deployment. And this is a really good way to see just how basically do like a light rollout and make sure that nothing has gone wrong during this deployment process before you fully roll it out and potentially break things and you have downtime and all of those types of potential situations that you might run into at scale sort of scenario. So this is going to take a second because it's having to pull an entirely new version of that container. So it'll take a second. But this is in the updating process. But while it's updating, we can also look at one other thing that we talked about, which is the monitoring aspect. So I ran let's run a couple more things in here. I'll run a new inference request. But I can see that there's this dashboard up here for our metrics. So if I go to this is a Grafana configured dashboard, and we can see it's already picked up that I'm doing a canary deployment, and some of the some of the metrics requests are already going to that new endpoint that's being created. But this is where I can see a lot of information just about what's going on inside of my deployment service. And we've configured the metrics and everything to come to this. So we can see from the service logs, there's a bunch of metrics type things, but we also get information around our prompt through or our token throughput and everything else that's going on under the hood with my inference service. If I go down here a little bit more, then I can see I also have some data about the requests that have come in. Sorry, this is kind of live updating. But we can find out information. If we want to pull that information into a new data set, then there's some ways that we can extract that information from our metrics and logging dashboards and everything. But this gives us a really simple way to immediately start monitoring some of the different things that are going on inside of our application. We can create new dashboards because there's tons and tons of data that's under the hood. This is a very simple one. But this gives us that monitoring ability and the ability to look at and extract some of the data if we're trying to then iterate with, we have this deployed service for a while, people are interacting with it. We now want to pull that data and start doing some data science on that. So this gives us a nice interface to look at some of that stuff and interact with it. So yeah, so we can see that my chat service is up and running. Just in the interest of time, we're just gonna trust that it's working, and we're gonna do one more canary rollout and just say, okay, I'm happy, I've interacted with this model, I'm pleased with it. Now I want to do another rollout, and this is going to be 100% of the traffic. And so the cool thing here is we have this service that's already up and running. And so it can swap over to that new service as soon as it's available. So we can see there's barely any time between taking that canary rollout service and moving just straight to the new deployment and having 100% of the traffic going to that new deployment. So this is exciting. And so basically it's the exact same endpoint, so nothing has changed on the routing front. And so, whoops, I'm gonna reload there. And I can do all kinds of things with this again and use the new service. We won't see anything that's very different, but just to show you another thing that you can do is I can also in this UI I can upload some files, and I can actually have some conversations with this model using the information that's in the file. So let's see, what should I know about the travel policy or PTO policy? Let's go for that. And so this is going to extract that information. And this is just going to send it to the model. And this is just a simple way to show that you can also do a lot of other things. Well, that's problematic. I didn't look at this file before I uploaded it. So I always hit some fun stuff during demos. There we go. Oh, leave policy is what there is. So it's not a PTO policy. So yeah, so we can see there's some interesting things there. And we're just interacting with this LLM that we deployed very quickly, and we're getting all of these other benefits of being able to have these reliable deployments, these versioned rollouts, and just some really cool things that the automatic routing, I can't stress that enough, but having these endpoints that are available and the canary rollouts that go to the same deployment, so you don't have to change all of your other software. So if we're writing our own chatbot, then you can rely on these endpoints and everything that's going along with that. So I'm going to pause there. I think there might be a question or two.
Yeah, we've got a question, Jimmy.
Sure.
Jeffrey Gray asks, do we have information on serving models that were trained or tuned in MLDE?
Yes, so I don't have that ready for this demo today, but essentially what we would do, so depending on where that model is stored, you could also create a registry that's pulling from S3. So if you have that model stored in an S3 bucket somewhere or something, then you put in the credentials to be able to access that bucket. But then what you would do is you would create, there's a couple different ways, but in this creating a new package model or adding a new package model, this is where you would select that registry. So pretend I just selected my Hugging Face registry, and then I would pick the model from there. Or in this case, say it's in an S3 bucket. If I had a S3 bucket registry here, then I would be able to select what type or how I want to deploy this model. So for that, typically we'd probably do an open LLM deployment there. But this is just a library that is making it easy to deploy models that are compatible with basically the Hugging Face API, which I think most fine-tuned LLMs, specifically in MLDE, should have that format coming out. And then we would just say, what do we want? This would automatically pick the right base image, so we could actually just skip that. And then we would provide it with, say, the S3 URL for that model, and then we would be able to move on from there. And so that's essentially how you would connect to a model that was trained with MLDE and deploy it. And then if you have something completely custom, so say you have a model that's probably not compatible with anything, then you would have to go kind of that next layer deeper. And how you would deploy that is you can still provide the, say, the S3 location of that model, but then you would also need to specify, so for instance, the custom image that I built that knows how to run that model. And so there's some really sophisticated ways where you can go super, super low level and still get all of the scaling benefits and automation benefits that MLIS has, but for something that you created completely custom. So yeah, so in some scenarios, I've done a lot with like different types of RAG deployments, and I have a service with, say, guardrails in there, RAG deployments, all kinds of other things. And I just want to deploy that service that's also interacting with some of the LLMs I have deployed inside MLIS as well. And you can then, yeah, I would have a custom image for that that has, say, Llama Index or whatever else installed there, and I can deploy that, and it'll interact with these other models.
Awesome. Thank you, Jimmy.
Hopefully that answered the question.
Wait, Hayden, I have one follow-up for that, if that's okay.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, so just, I know that question was about determined or MLDE, starting with the 1.2.0 release of MLIS, which is coming out later this month. We will connect directly to MLDM or Pachyderm. So I know that's like slightly different variation of the question, but of course, one of our other products is Pachyderm, which helps with data and model management. And if you use Pachyderm as a model registry, you'll be able to connect directly to it, just like you can with NGC here that Jimmy showed. Anyway, sorry,
Nice.
back to you, Hayden.
Thank you, Derek. Two questions, one product, one technical. Jay Kumar asks, is MLIS a SaaS model or can it be deployed anywhere?
It can be deployed anywhere. So basically, the only requirement is basically the recent version of the recent stable version of Kubernetes, like a Kubernetes install. So for instance, this right here, I actually have it deployed inside of GCP, but it will also, we'll talk about this a little bit. But there's also on-prem option. So if you already have your own hardware and you want to install it on-prem, then basically you just need to have a Kubernetes cluster on-prem, and then this can be installed on top of that. We also have another mechanism or delivery mechanism that's coming out that I'll have a slide for in a second, called PCAI. And so if you're interested in, we need hardware and the Kubernetes infrastructure on top of it and MLIS on top of that, then basically we're HPE, we can we sell, like, want to be able to sell the full bundle. So it's, here's the box that has everything ready for you. And so there's options across the spectrum. If you're just interested in the software, then that's definitely that's available. And if you're interested in going deeper, need like the full infrastructure as well, then there's options for that.
Fantastic.
I think there's one more question as well. Sorry.
Yep. George Soto asks, well, he says, great session. Thank you, George. Thank you, Jimmy and Derek. Is this able to be extended for models hosted on Azure or other cloud providers? We may need some more info to answer that.
Yeah. So yeah, so for instance, if you have a model that you want to deploy inside of MLIS, inside of Azure, then you're probably using, I'm trying to remember there, is it AKS? I can't remember exactly what Azure's Kubernetes service is. Then you can deploy MLIS inside of that and pull models from wherever your object storage is or wherever the model is stored. So you can deploy inside of any environment. If you're talking about models are deployed inside of Azure and you want MLIS to monitor those, then that's probably a little bit of that doesn't really work. That's kind of a quirky thing where mainly because MLIS is managing that deployment and doing all the Kubernetes things under the hood. So if you have a model that's deployed inside of Azure, like directly in Azure, then basically MLIS wouldn't be able to have control over all the things that Azure is doing to do all those things. So there's that's like two answers depending on which way the question goes.
All right, and we've got two similar questions. These are somewhat anticipated. What is free and how can we get our hands on it?
Yeah. So I have a lot of interest in us open sourcing this right now. MLIS isn't open sourced. We just finished the development in well, we just released it and GA'd it in June. I know that there's some conversations around that. So nothing, unfortunately, is available as open source right now. This is built heavily on open source components like Kserve and OpenLLM we saw here. NIMs are not open sourced, but because there's an MV or an NVIDIA license that's associated with those. But yeah, a lot of these things are built on open source components, which is exciting. And I'm personally very definitely interested in having an open source version of this. But those are still some conversations that are going on.
And if someone had a use case and was working somewhere where this would be useful, we could certainly set up a call and have a conversation. You do a more in-depth personalized demo and that kind of thing, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways. If there's interest in learning more, or yeah, if the full enterprise thing is maybe not where you quite are yet, then it's definitely worth reaching out and having a conversation because yeah, there's different tiers in the pricing. If it's a startup, then obviously we want to be sensitive to that. Those are questions that are beyond me. That's more for I guess like the sales and customer engineer teams and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's kind of where that is right now.
Awesome. Well, that's it for questions for now. We've got 10 more minutes. You want to land this plane?
Let's do it. I mentioned PCAI. So essentially what that is, this is just more just letting you know that there are some options out there. But PCAI is basically what we talked about. If you're interested in that hardware, software, like models and services all bundled together, there are some options for that. And then one level deeper than that, we also have services that support everything kind of across the board. So this is like the white glove onboarding experience. If you're not very experienced in deploying Kubernetes and Helm and all of those types of things to get MLIS in your internal infrastructure or something, then there's ways that we can kind of help you throughout the process. If we have some more questions, we can definitely go back to some of those. But similar to what Hayden and I were just talking about, if it's helpful to talk with somebody on the solutions team about LLMOps or any of the other things that you've seen kind of in this MLIS webinar, then definitely reach out to us at AI Questions. We can do a detailed kind of walkthrough of what you saw here, so you can just interact with the person the entire time and talk through just your application or how you're thinking about deploying things, what your needs are. A lot of different things. We have some really strong experts here to walk through probably whatever scenario you're imagining.
Thank you, Jimmy. I had one question. I've been focusing a lot lately on building end user applications with ML enabled functionality. We've talked about the API endpoint. Is that a standard REST API endpoint?
Yeah, it is. Or so basically, so APIs can be pretty much anything. I would say most industries have sort of standardized just the popularity of chat or of GPT or just OpenAI models in general, GPT-4o, whatever else. The popularity of those models, they've essentially released like this is the OpenAI API spec or the API itself. And so and that has kind of some of the endpoints that we saw, the completions endpoint, the models endpoint, and some of those things. Pretty much, we tried to adhere. If you have something completely custom, then you can do anything in those APIs. But with NIMs and OpenLLM and a lot of the tools that you would use out of the box, they all support those OpenAI API specs. And yeah, then you can use a very standard. You can use the OpenAI Python library. You can use. I was using the Open Web UI to actually just interact with the service that we saw here. You can use pretty much any tool that you can imagine will be able to interact with these things. So if you're doing some web development as well, I know that there's JavaScript libraries that know how to talk to the OpenAI API spec, and you would just set your endpoint to point to where your model is served, your internal model. And then your development happens exactly as you would expect or as you would want it to.
So any standard programming language development ecosystem that has an OpenAI compatible library, depending on the ecosystem, there may be multiple, will likely be able to interact with the MLIS endpoint.
That's correct. And even one step further, if there's not one, which is probably pretty rare, but it's still a simple REST API at the end of the day. So there are some libraries that have the nice function calls and know how to handle the streaming responses if you're using streaming and stuff like that. But you can also just do simple web requests as well. So just a curl request will also work. Or if you're using JavaScript, there's a million different libraries for requests and stuff like that. Or maybe Derek, if you want to speak to, to anything, not
Oh,
to put
no,
you on the
you've
spot.
done a great job answering the questions, Jimmy. Yeah. But yeah, no, thank you. I guess thank you for attending and asking some great questions about the product. We're excited about it. I guess maybe the last thing I'll say is this product just launched in June. So what you saw today is just the start. But we have an exciting, I think, roadmap plan to really develop this further and make it, I guess, more flexible and more powerful for deployment use cases.
Derek, Jimmy, thank you guys so much. And thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.